Alright, so let's make sure that it kicks in. Yeah, that's the one big advantage of doing it with these platforms. I was one of those guys who said, well, I'd never give up on my OBS and stuff, and I still haven't, but it is a lot easier getting this all set up and going before the shows. I mean, just to say, because I had to do a lot of preparation. I had to have everything organized and ready and put the way I needed it. It took about maybe 15 to 20 minutes to do, but now I'm right on it. So I have got everything set up and good to go by the looks of it, and I will be back here. in a little bit to start the show. Now, I was debating on if I wanted to do if I wanted to actually do the music like I do, but I also decided no, I'm gonna do this one.
Long before the rivers knew their name, before the mountains whispered flame, a voice was born, a tongue untamed, a song that time could never claim. Trust speak and let the first words fly. Let roots take hold, let stories rise. For though their lips have turned to stone, the first hymn sings, we are not alone. Long before the rivers knew their name, before the mountains whispered flame, a voice was born, a tongue untamed, a song that time could never claim.
Okay, so we still have 7 more minutes. I'm going to put on another song for the remainder of the time. I figured I'd come in and put something else on. Now, we do have some new stuff from Mr. Robot, which I was wanting to put on. So I'm going to put Redacted on from Mr. Robot. And I hope you guys enjoy it. So here you go. Okay, so with that being said, we are at the top of the hour. I am going to get ready to do the show. So as soon as it hits the o'clock, we are going to do it. And I'm just less than a minute away from that. So here we go. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Strange Stories. Today is going to be a little bit different than my weird science, like I said before the stream started, but it's going to be kind of like it. Or it's going to be kind of like it, but it's going to be different. What it is it's not going to be into like the weird scientists and everything that I was talking about in the last two episodes. Now, this one is going to be about remarkable survival stories of different women, men and women, particularly head injuries that were dealt to them by things like gunshot wounds and things of that nature. And the reason why I did that is because, like the last season that I did, I did stories about oddities when it comes to different people. Like I know there's a story of the Elastic Man and stuff like that, and I like doing stories like that because with me, I'm not all about like the UFOs and the paranormal and all that stuff. I'm also one of those Ripley's Believe It or Not kind of people. You know what I mean? I get into stuff of that nature as well. So I wanted to add that into this show in the first season, and that's why I incorporated the weird science in, and I'm wanting to bring this up as a part of Strange Stories as well. Also, before I get going, I want everybody to know too that the full version of this stream will be uploaded to my other YouTube channel called Strange Stories, as well as having this live stream. Now, on the Wonderful World of Weirdness, if you don't catch this stream or you don't see the one that's on Strange Stories, don't worry about it. After the first season of Strange Stories, which is posting right now, is done, I will do this season's 15-minute video clips of this season after that, if that made any sense whatsoever. So you'll have at least 3 chances to watch this. So don't worry about that. It's taken care of. But with that being said, I just wanted everybody to know that this is going to be uploaded also to, well, actually, Strange Stories. Yeah, I'm sorry. Strange Stories is not uploaded yet onto the YouTube channel Strange Stories, I don't believe. But Ancient Mysteries or Strange Stories, one of the two. But I will find out. I believe that it is on there. Not sure. But anyhow, I mean, I should have checked that out before I started saying it. I get confused with the two channels. So now, with all of that being said, I'd also like to say thank you to Mr. Robot for allowing me to use his music on the streams. If you guys want to check him out, you can check him out on Rumble. He goes by Killuminati. And he also has Hacker Radio, which is pretty cool. He's got a lot of good mixes and stuff. So stop by and check out his music. And, leave him a comment. Tell him how much you like it. Things of that. Subscribe to him. He does pretty good stuff. So, with that being said, I am going to go ahead and get into this week's topic, and it's the remarkable survival stories of men and women. So, get ready because here it comes. Now, throughout history, there have been incredible cases of individuals surviving severe head injuries that should have been fatal. All right. These stories not only highlight the extraordinary resilience of the human body, but also provide invaluable invaluable insights, into neuroscience and medicine. One of the most famous cases is that of Phineas Gage, okay, whose survival and subsequent personality changes made him a subject of scientific fascination. However, many others, both men and women, have endured similarly astonishing injuries and lived to share their experiences. Phineas Gage, a 25-year-old railroad foreman in 1848, was working on a railroad project in Vermont when an explosion sent a tamping iron, a 3.5-foot long metal rod, shooting through his skull, literally right through his skull. The rod entered below his left cheekbone and exited the top of his head, destroying a large portion of his frontal lobe. Amazingly, Gage remained conscious and even spoke shortly after the accident. He was able to walk and ride. He was able to walk and ride a cart to the doctor even. Though he physically recovered, his personality changed dramatically. He became impulsive, irritable, and prone to fits of rage. His case was one of the earliest pieces of evidence linking brain function to personality and decision-making, revolutionizing the field of neuroscience. Now, after that, I'm going to go forward into the year 2009 in Mississippi. A resident by the name of Tammy Sexton was shot in the forehead by her husband, who then took his own life. The .38 caliber bullet passed through her skull, but miraculously didn't kill her. Not only did she survive, but she was also able to stand up, walk to her kitchen, and make herself a cup of tea before medical personnel arrived. Sexton's survival was attributed to the angle of the bullet and the fact that it narrowly missed critical brain structures. Now, after that, we come to 2024 with Maya James, a 26-year-old mother of two from Belize, surviving a gunshot wound to the head in a violent incident that took another person's life. Despite the trauma, James remained conscious and later recounted her experience, a testament of human endurance. Her case underscores the unpredictability of brain injuries. Some survive wounds that should be fatal, while others perish from seemingly minor injuries. Now, in 2020, in San Antonio, a resident by the name of Virginia Houston was shot twice in the head by her partner. Incredibly, she remained awake and conscious throughout the ordeal and was able to describe what happened to first responders. She made a miraculous recovery and later spoke publicly about domestic violence awareness, showing extraordinary strength in both body and spirit. A woman in Miami was shot in the back of the head while driving. Though the bullet entered her skull, she remained conscious and managed to drive to a safer location where she was later rescued and taken to a hospital. Her survival was due in part to the bullet's trajectory, which missed vital areas of the brain like I mentioned before. Now, the human brain is both fragile and remarkably adaptable. Survivors of extreme head trauma often provide neuroscientists with unique insights into brain function, plasticity, and recovery. In cases like Phineas Gage's personality and cognitive changes, they reveal how different brain regions influence behavior. Meanwhile, modern survivors like Maya James and Virginia Houston demonstrate how medical advancements and immediate care can dramatically improve outcomes. Now, The factors contributing to survival of these incidents include the trajectory and velocity of the object or the bullet. It also it depends on the location of the wound and whether critical brain structures were affected. Besides that, there's also the quick medical intervention and advances in trauma care. Now, other than that, too, the individual variability in brain resilience and healing is important, too. Now, these stories of men and women surviving what should have been fatal head injuries challenge our understanding of the limits of human resilience. From Phineas Gage's life-altering accident in the 19th century to modern-day gunshot survivors who walk into hospitals with wounds in their skulls. These cases highlight both the fragility and remarkable endurance that the human body has. Now, in neuroscience and emergency medicine, as they continue to advance, study of these survivors will help improve treatments, and it'll deepen our understanding of the brain's ability to heal after trauma. The scientific community explains these extraordinary survivor stories through advancements in neuroscience, trauma medicine, and an understanding of brain plasticity. Now, I'm going to go further in the whole brain plasticity thing, but I'm not going to get too deep into like the neuroscience and the trauma medicine. Not really the trauma medicine at all, but maybe a little bit in the neuroscience. But anyhow, the brain has a remarkable ability to reorganize itself after injury. In cases like Phineas Gage, where specific brain regions were damaged, other areas of the brain may have taken over some lost functions. This is known as neuroplasticity, where the brain forms new connections to compensate for damage. Some brain injuries, despite being severe, do not always affect critical areas responsible for life functions, like the brainstem, which controls breathing and heart rate. If a rod or bullet passes through a non-vital area or avoids major blood vessels, survival is more likely, basically. In cases where individuals survive being shot in the head, the trajectory of the projectile matters. If major arteries are not severely damaged, blood loss can be controlled, which also allows survival. Now, modern medicine with rapid trauma care, antibiotics, and surgical techniques has significantly increased survival rates for severe head injuries as well. Even in Gage's time, rudimentary medicine, medical knowledge of like infection prevention and stuff like that played a role in his survival. Some people have anatomically variations of their brain or skull that may make them more likely to survive such traumas too. For instance, thicker skull bones or an unusual positioning of blood vessels that can sometimes reduce the severity of the injuries. Now, some survivors of extreme brain trauma exhibit unexpected cognitive recovery due to their brain's ability to reroute functions over time. Others experience personality changes, as seen in Phineas Gage, indicating that different regions of the brain influences behavior. Now, these cases continue to be studied in neuroscience and medicine, shedding light on how the brain withstands trauma and recovers from severe injuries. Now, later on in another episode, I am going to get more into neuroscience because that is something that is very, very important when it comes to, weirdness with the topics that I cover and the people that I associate with. Neuroscience is it plays very big role in that. So I'm not going to dive too deep into it. And in this episode, I really did want to make an effort not to get too deep into it so that I could actually get back to that later on and discuss it more in depth. I've done that on some of my older videos, which you can check out, but they were just little bits and pieces, clips that I added together, and so that I could first fix the audio on the old footage, and second, so that I could make it longer. So, but you can find it on some of my episodes or on some of my videos. You just have to look around for it. I believe on the cut there I have some of it. The cut has a few things that mention neuroscience, and esoteric agenda may mention some of it. I'm not quite sure on that one though. But anyhow, after Phineas Gage's accident in which a tamping iron was blasted through his skull and brain, his personality underwent significant changes. Like I said, before the injury, Gage was described as a hardworking, responsible, and well-liked person. But afterwards, his behavior became erratic, impulsive, and socially inappropriate. He became rude and profane, often using vulgar language that he never had used before. He disregarded social norms and was no longer respectful towards colleagues and friends. He disregarded social norms, like I said. Then he exhibited inappropriate emotional responses, sometimes laughing at serious matters. He became unable to plan ahead or make sound decisions, too. So he would start projects but never finish them, showing a lack of foresight, stuff like that. He also struggled to hold down a job because of recklessness and unreliable behavior. Gage became prone to anger outbursts, which he hadn't displayed before. Just after his accident happened, he just started having anger outbursts, So his temper was quick and unpredictable, basically, making interactions with other people difficult. He would become irritable easy and act on emotions without thinking. So it was just like his emotions would just go off and he'd snap. He no longer cared about his old responsibilities despite being a model worker before the accident. His employers noted that he ignored rules and structure, which led to him being unable to return to his previous job, which he had on the railroad. And that is a dangerous job. You can't have people like that work on the railroad. Just so you know, I knew a guy by the name of Ed Hargett, and I knew his kids, and he was a railroad guy, and he had chemicals that was in one of the train sheds explode in his face, man, and it caused a lot of trauma to him. He ended up not being able to work for the railroad anymore. He did get some good money from it, but from the damage that was done to him physically, it wasn't worth it. You know what I mean? So that is something. You can't be working on the train or working for a train company and acting that way. It's dangerous for you and the people around you. So let me see now. Better stop getting distracted. Now, he eventually drifted from place to place and able to maintain steady work. Some accounts also suggest that he acted on base instincts rather than logical reasoning. His once thoughtful personality became impulsive and erratic. Some researchers compare his behavior to what happens in modern cases of prefrontal cortex damage, where patients act more on immediate desires rather than long-term consequences. Now, these personality changes suggest damage to the prefrontal frontal cortex, which is responsible for impulse control, decision making, and social behavior. Now, while he physically survived, those who knew him claimed that Gage was no longer Gage, indicating a profound transformation in his identity. Now, after that, with that story, I want to go on to Tammy Sexton. Okay, now Tammy Sexton's survival after being shot in the head is pretty remarkable. The incident occurred in April of 2009 in Mississippi when her estranged husband, Dennis Sexton, shot her at close range before turning the gun on himself. Despite being shot in the forehead, she was able to stand up, walk around, and even speak with first responders after the attack. Now, Dennis Saxton shot her with a .38 380 caliber handgun at point blank range. Okay, and that's a 38. Now, the bullet entered her forehead slightly above her right eye and traveled through her skull. Instead of penetrating deeply into the brain, though, the bullet followed the curve of her skull, exiting from the back of her head without causing fatal brain damage. Now, the bullet didn't pass through critical brain structures. Instead, it likely traveled along the skull's outer layers rather than deep into the brain tissues. .380 caliber round is relatively small compared to a higher caliber bullet, which might have also caused more severe trauma. After being shot, she reportedly got up, walked outside, and spoke to police officers, seemingly unaware of how severe her injuries was. This suggests shock and adrenaline that kept her functioning temporarily. Now, despite the severe injury, Tammy remained conscious and was able to talk to first responders when they arrived. She was eventually airlifted to the hospital where doctors treated her wounds. Miraculously, she did not suffer major neurological damage. Tammy Sexton's survival is one of the rare cases where a gunshot wound to the head does not result in immediate death or severe impairment. Similar cases have been documented in medical literature where bullets skirt the brain rather than penetrate deeply, allowing victims to survive against all odds. Now, Tammy Sexton's survival was extraordinary because the bullet narrowly missed critical brain structures that would have likely resulted in immediate death or severe impairment. The bullet entered above her right eye, but did not penetrate deeply into the prefrontal cortex, which controls decision-making, personality, and impulse controls. Now, if this area had been significantly damaged, she could have experienced severe cognitive and behavioral changes similar to Phineas Gage. The bullet did not damage the primary motor cortex, which is responsible for voluntary movement. Likewise, the sensory cortex, which processes touch and spatial awareness, remained intact. If these areas had been hit, she could have suffered paralysis or loss of sensation in parts of her body. The brainstem controls vital functions like breathing, heart rate, and consciousness. A bullet passing through or damaging this area is almost always instantly fatal. In Tammy's case, the bullet did not reach the midbrain or pons, meaning her autonomic functions were unaffected. Now, major arteries supplies blood to the brain. If one had been hit, it could have led to a massive hemorrhage and immediate death. The middle cerebral artery, which supplies much of the brain's oxygenated blood, was not affected. Now, these areas control memory, emotional processing, and consciousness. If the bullet had hit the thalamus, she could have lost consciousness immediately or suffered severe sensory impairment. Now, the limbic system involved in emotions and behavior was not significantly damaged. The bullet entered the skull above the right eye, like I said, possibly hitting the frontal bone and deflecting along the outer surface of the skull rather than penetrating deep into the brain. Let me just go ahead and say it did exit the back of her head without causing severe damage to the internal structure. Now, I've heard of this, okay, and the thing of it is when I actually started looking into this, I thought that it was like rare occasions that happened every once in a while, but the more I checked into it, I found out that this is happening all the time. Like, I think I've got a list of 10 people right now that just kind of skim over it, but there are tons of cases where this stuff has happened, especially head injuries that involve gunshot wounds. I think that is what is so amazing, that a lot of people have actually survived gunshot wounds of this nature. Some of them got up, went and talked to the EMTs and the police officers, and some of them didn't even know or weren't even aware that they had been injured and that their wounds were fatal if they didn't get it taken care of soon. That's something that really did stick out to me, and it happens a lot. It happens a lot compared to what you would think it would happen. You know what I mean? So that was something that I did want to touch on before I went further. Now, since speech centers like Broca's area and motor functions were intact, she was able to walk, talk, and interact with first responders despite the severe injuries. Adrenaline and shock may have also temporarily masked the pain and disorientation. Now, Tammy Sexton's case is an example of how precise bullet trajectory can make the difference between life and death in head injuries. All right, so that's her story. I wanted to end it there, and the next one I'm going to talk about happened in June of 2023 in DeKalb County. A mother experienced a life-threatening incident when a stray bullet struck her in the head while she was returning home in a Lyft ride. Now, the bullet entered her forehead, but miraculously, it did not penetrate deeply into her brain. Instead, the bullet followed the curvature of her skull, like before, and exited from the back of her head, narrowly missing critical brain structures. Now, this trajectory prevented fatal damage, just like before with Tammy, and allowed the bullet to narrowly miss critical brain structures, basically. The trajectory prevented fatal damage and allowed her to remain conscious and interact with the first responders as well. Okay, doctors were unable to remove the bullet, but she survived without major neurological impairments. So this time, they were not able to remove the bullet, and she still survived without major neurological impairments. Now, her survival is attributed to the bullet's specific path, which avoided vital areas of the brain responsible for essential functions such as movement, sensation, and cognition, just like before with Tammy. Now, additionally, her wig played a role in reducing the bullet's impact, contributing to her remarkable recovery. This case underscores the unpredictable nature of gunshot injuries and highlights how slight variations in bullet trajectory can significantly influence outcomes. Now, moving on from her, in late June of 2022, Regina Houston endured a harrowing incident where she was shot twice in the head by her partner of 19 years at their San Antonio home. Now, despite the severity of her injuries, she survived and was able to recount the ordeal. The exact medical details of her injuries were not publicly disclosed, though, but the fact that she could recall the events suggests that the critical brain structures responsible for memory, consciousness, and vital functions weren't irreparably damaged or irreparably damaged. Her survival underscores the unpredictable nature of gunshot wounds to the head, where outcomes can vary based on factors such as bullet trajectory, caliber, and immediate medical intervention. Now, in April of 2024, Maya James, a 26-year-old mother of two, was involved in a violent incident on the Placentia Road in Belize. That resulted in the death of her friend, 32-year-old Roy Lee Burgess, and left her critically injured. The shooting occurred in April of 2024 at mile 22 along the Placentia Road in Belize. Maya James and Roy Burgess were seated inside a vehicle when an assailant approached and opened fire. Burgess was fatally shot, and James sustained a gunshot wound to her head. James was shot in the head with the bullet entering her face. Following the shooting, bullet fragments remained lodged near her spine, necessitating urgent medical intervention. Despite the severity of her injuries, James survived and underwent multiple life-saving surgeries. To address her medical expenses, a GoFundMe campaign was launched to raise funds for the removal of bullet fragments. The key suspect in the shooting, identified as 31-year-old Ellis Megan, was apprehended in the United States. Now, Maya James survived in recovery, highlight her resilience in the face of life-threatening injuries, and underscore the complexity involved in such violent incidences. Several incidences in Miami, Florida, have involved women surviving gunshot wounds to the head. You have Ashley Rodriguez, who's 22, and was driving when a bullet entered through the left side of her car's headrest and struck the right side of the back of her head. Now, the bullet hit her skull, deflecting downward and lodged near her jaw. She was conscious upon arrival at Jackson South Medical Center, but soon experienced breathing difficulties and brain herniation. Emergency surgery was performed, and Rodriguez survived the life-threatening injuries. While holding her baby inside a parked car at a discount store, a woman was shot in the head during a dispute between two other individuals. She sustained a gunshot wound to the head but remained conscious and was able to recount the incident. The victim survived, and the alleged shooter was arrested and charged. In January 2025, during a road rage incident on I-595 near Hiatus Road in Davie, Florida, Rondrika Davis was shot in the head while driving with her husband. She was hospitalized with bullet fragments remaining in her head. Davis survived the shooting and spoke publicly about the incident. A woman was driving south on I-95 near Northwest 62nd Street when she heard gunshots and realized she had been struck in the neck. She sustained a neck injury but was able to drive to a hospital for treatment. The woman was treated for her injuries and survived. Now, these cases highlight the unpredictability nature of gunshot injuries as well, and the resilience of the victims that were involved. The scientific community explains extraordinary survival stories, such as those of Phineas Gage, Tammy Sexton, and others who have survived severe brain injuries through advancements in neuroscience, trauma, medicine, and neuroplasticity, like I said before. Now, these cases do provide valuable insights into how the brain copes with catastrophic damage, and how medical intervention have improved survival rates. One of the most critical reasons people can survive devastating brain injuries and neuroplasticity can survive devastating injuries is because of neuroplasticity. Now, the brain's ability to rewire itself. The brain has built-in rudimentaries, meaning multiple areas can perform similar functions. When one area is damaged, another can sometimes compensate and take its place. Now, a good example would be with Phineas Gage. Despite losing a portion of his brain, which was the left frontal lobe, Gage survived because other brain regions adapted to take over some lost functions. However, his exhibited personality changes because the damaged area was because of the exhibited personality changes because of the damaged areas was responsible for impulse control and decision making. Another example would be Tammy Sexton, which I mentioned, and that happened in 2009. Sexton was shot in the back of the head, but the bullet passed through without hitting vital structures like the brainstem or major blood vessels. Some parts of the brain, especially the outer cortex, can sustain injuries without causing immediate death if deeper. Now, more critical areas remained intact. Okay. A key factor in many miraculous survival cases is the trajectory of the bullet or object passing through the skull. If a bullet misses major arteries, the brainstem, and essential motor sensory areas, survival is more likely. Some cases involve ricocheting bullets or partial penetration, where the skull absorbs much of the force. A good example of that is Maya James, which was in 2024, where a bullet entered through her forehead but exited without completely destroying her motor cortex or speech centers. Another example is Virginia Houston. She survived a gunshot to the head because the bullet missed her brainstem and primary motor functions. Now, again, I'm going to say medical advancements have dramatically increased survival rates for severe head trauma. And I do have to tell you that when I say it again, that when I actually went through and started finding all this stuff, I found out that there are a lot of people who actually have gone through this. This is something that's really, really amazing when it comes to the human body and how the brain works, especially, and the trajectory of the object when it hits the brain and where it goes, and it can bounce off of your skull and not cause fatal damage at all. So let me see here. I'm going to check and see if anybody stopped in. Yeah, we have Show Me Dim Titties, who started following on Beam Stream. And he stopped watching. He probably didn't like hearing the gunshot wounds. But we have 2 people watching on Rumble. I don't know who or how many people have been watching on X or DLive. And with Kick, I have no comments or anything else whatsoever. And no views at the moment. So, with that being said, I'm going to go ahead and continue where I left off. So, let me see here. Now, after that, I want to get into rapid emergency response. The faster transport and immediate medical interventions do help control swelling, prevent excessive blood loss, and minimize secondary brain injuries. Microsurgical techniques and neuropsychological repair is another part of it. But with me, I just done my weird science thing, and that's something that is very controversial to me because I know the history behind all that. If I have to go through it, then I don't know how I would feel about it. You know what I mean? There was a lot of bad things that took place in history concerning microsurgical techniques and stuff like that. But, you don't know until it happens to you, basically. So I really can't sit and say that I wouldn't go through it. But anyhow, techniques like cranial decompression, removing part of the skull to allow the brain to swell without pressure damage. That helps prevent fatal swelling. Then you have hemostatic agents and clotting medications that can stop excessive bleeding. And then, like I covered this before in previous streams, immunosuppressants and infection control. That's another thing. That's especially the one thing that I would have issue with in cases where the skull fragments or foreign objects enter the brain. Antibiotics and immunosuppressive treatments help prevent infection and immune overreaction. If a gunshot wound does not damage the brainstem, the body's vital functions like breathing and heart rate can continue. That's another thing that needs to be understood. A gunshot to the head left some of these people conscious because it didn't disrupt autonomic functions in the brainstem. That's another thing that's very important. Now, you do have brainstem survival mechanisms as well. The reticular activating system, RAS, it controls consciousness and alertness. Now, if the RAS remains intact, a person can stay awake even after a severe head injury. Cases where victims remain conscious after being shot in the head suggest minimal disruption to the RAS. Despite medical and scientific exploration, some cases are difficult to explain beyond sheer luck. Okay. And that has to do with some things like bone density and skull structure. That would have to do with like thicker skulls that can deflect bullets. There's some some instances where bullets graze rather than penetrate deep. Then you have high velocity bullets, which often shatter brain tissue, while low velocity bullets may pass through with less destruction. So that's something to take into consideration as well. Now, survivors of catastrophic brain injuries often owe their lives to a combination of neuroplasticity, damage avoidance, advanced medical care, and biological resilience. Each case provides valuable insight into how the brain withstands trauma and continues to function despite severe damage. Ongoing research in neurosurgery, brain mapping, and regenerative medicine continues to improve survival rates and recovery outcomes. The brain's remarkable ability to recognize itself is known as neuroplasticity, the capacity of neural networks to adapt and change in response to injury, learning, and environmental stimuli. Neuroplasticity plays a crucial role in recovery from brain injuries, including severe trauma like that suffered severe trauma like that suffered by Phineas Gage, Tammy Sexton, and other extraordinary survivors of head wounds. When parts of the brain are damaged due to trauma, stroke, or disease, neurons can rewire themselves, allowing undamaged areas to take over lost functions. New neural pathways form. When a brain region is injured, surrounding neurons may sprout new dendrites and axons to reroute information. If the left hemisphere is damaged, the right hemisphere may take over some language or motor functions. In some stroke patients who's lost movement on one side, therapy and repetition help rewire the motor cortex, allowing them to regain partial functioning. That's one good example. Now, when a specific brain function is lost, nearby or distant brain areas can compensate over time. That would be like blindness and touch sensitivity. In blind individuals, the visual cortex can be repurposed to process touch and sound, improving skills like braille reading. Now, I do want to bring up Phineas Gage's personality changes too. After a tamping iron destroyed part of his left frontal lobe, Gage's behaviors changed, but he did remain functional. You know what I mean? Over time, his prefrontal cortex rewired, and it helped him regain some social abilities. The brain strengthens useful neuron pathways, and it weakens unused ones. That's called the synaptic pruning. Now, repeating use of a pathway strengthens it, helping recovery. You have things like speech recovery after brain damage. A stroke patient who loses speech, which is aphasia, it can regain communication skills by retaining undamaged language areas. Now, if one part of the brain is damaged, other regions can take over its functions. That's what you need to understand. All right, it can happen. A good example of that would be like bullet wounds to the head, which I've been discussing here. Some gunshot survivors retain cognitive abilities because their brain found new pathways to bypass the damaged tissues. Many survivors of extreme injuries like gunshots or impalement benefit from three key neuroplastic mechanisms. When primary regions are damaged, secondary areas step in. And a good example would be if the left hemisphere is damaged, the right hemisphere may assist in language processing. Then the brain redesigns its map of functions. So it's like a map of what its functions are supposed to be. The brain literally redesigns that. Another example is if the motor cortex is damaged, nearby regions may reassign control over movement. That would be like neurons that fire together, wire together, kind of thing. You know what I mean? Uh, Now, another example would be in stroke patients who repeatedly practice a lost skill. They rebuild connections. Um, that would be something like that. Now, scientists are exploring ways to enhance brain recovery using stem cell therapy to regenerate lost neurons, and I have an issue with stem cell therapy when it comes with stem cells. Period. With anything when it comes to doctors playing around with stem cells, um, not big on the genetically modified stuff. So then they have the brain computer interfaces, which is the BCIs, and that's used to reconnect damaged neural circuits. Then you have neural stimulation, which is TMS and DBS, and that's to activate dormant brain areas. Now, neuroplasticity is the key to why some people survive devastating brain injuries and recover lost functions. The brain's adaptability allows it to compensate for trauma, providing that even after catastrophic damage, recovery is possible through reorganization, compensation, and training. During Phineas Gage's time in 1848, medical knowledge of infection prevention was rudimentary at best. The germ theory of disease was not yet widely accepted, and antiseptic techniques were virtually non-existent. Now, physicians and surgeons operated in unsanitary conditions, often without washing their hands or sterilizing instruments. Despite these limitations, Gage miraculously survived a severe head injury, which would have been fatal for most people due to infection alone. In 1848, doctors believed in miasma theory, which suggested that bad air, which is miasma, caused infections rather than bacteria or viruses. Louis Pasteur's germ theory, which currently identified microorganisms as the cause of infection, would not gain acceptance until the 1860s. As a result, doctors and surgeons did not sanitize their hands or tools, leading to high post-surgical mortality from sepsis, which is blood infection, and gangrene. Now, surgery was often performed in unclean environments, with doctors wearing blood-stained coats as a badge of experience. Surgical instruments were reused without sterilization. There were no gloves that were worn, and wounds were often exposed to dirt, bacteria, and contamination. Gage's injury was open and through, meaning that pus and fluid could drain rather than accumulate. In contrast, closed wounds often festered, leading to deadly infections like gangrene. Now, Dr. John Harlow, Gage's physician, kept the wound clean by washing it with water, a rudimentary but crucial step in infection control. Harlow also covered the wound to prevent excessive contamination, though antiseptics were not used. Gage developed severe infections, including fungal growth in his brain, yet survived. His strong immune system likely played a major role in overcoming the infection. In the 1860s, Joseph Lister pioneered antiseptic surgery using carbolic acid to sterilize tools and dress wounds. In the 1870s, germ therapy became widely accepted, transforming medicine. Then in the 1890s, gloves and sterilization became standard in surgery, drastically reducing post-surgical infections. Now, Phineas Gage's survival was a remarkable case of luck, resilience, and basic wound care in a time when medical science barely understood infection prevention. His case highlights how far medicine has come from unsanitary 19th century practices to modern uh, aseptic surgical techniques. So I went through all of my notes on that. I am done. There were some parts in there that there were key parts in there where I really didn't like it because I know the history of it. But I am aware of some of the things when it comes to the history with Phineas Gage and how unsanitary things were back then. So kind of gives you this dilemma, you know what I mean? Because I know like about the experiments when it comes to animals and the iron lung and attaching a dog's head to freaking another dog's to see how long they could live, you know, and that turns my stomach. I'm not cool about that. But at the same time, when you look at these injuries and you think about it, you know, it puts you in that state where you have to, you know, decide for yourself if it's good or if it's not, you know. So I put that out there, man. What do you guys think? You know what I mean? Make comments and let me know in the comment section so that I can talk to you, have a conversation about it. You know, if you enjoyed this video, please like, subscribe, share, make comments, whatever. You know, I mean, I'm always willing to talk in the comment section. So feel free to mention, give some feedback. You know what I mean? So I checked the stream and it doesn't look like there's anything actually going on conversation wise in the chat section. So I think I survived. And like I said, you know, this technically wasn't supposed to be a part of my weird science. It was actually supposed to be about the human endurance and survival stories of men and women who survived a lot of traumatic head injuries and things of that nature. It's something that I did want to cover, and I finally was able to do it, at least for one episode. You know what I mean? So, that being said, I am going to go ahead and end this stream. I hope you guys have a great day, and I will talk to you later. Thanks for watching.